My stepsister thought she was walking away with my billionaire husband's empire, until our divorce hearing turned into a courtroom where I held all the cards. Before I get into the exact moment, my attorney nearly choked on her own laughter at Camilla's demands. Drop a pin in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. This story takes a turn you won't see coming. The boardroom overlooking downtown was the kind of place where deals went to die. Polished steel, frosted glass, and the kind of silence that felt like a held breath. Across the massive table sat my husband, Ethan. He was staring at the wood grain like it might open up and swallow him. Beside him, my stepsister, Camille, was practically glowing. She wore a soft beige dress, the color I'd worn to my last anniversary dinner, and kept one hand pressed lightly against her stomach. A picture-perfect portrait of the new wife. "I know this isn't easy for you," Camille started, her voice a practiced whisper. She leaned forward, trying to look sympathetic. "But we want to be fair. Just tell us what you need to walk away. Alimony, the condo, name your price." That was the moment my lawyer, Valerie, let out a quiet snort. It wasn't loud, but in that sterile room it sounded like a gunshot. Camille's rehearsed sympathy vanished. Her eyes snapped to Valerie, then to me. "Is there a problem?" Valerie didn't answer her. She just looked at me with a slight smile and slid a folder across the table. I finally turned my full attention to Camille, the woman who had spent months cozying up to my husband, pretending to be my friend, all while plotting to take my life. I let the silence stretch until she started to fidget. "Are you sure you can afford it?" I asked, my voice low. Because to understand why a high-powered attorney was laughing in the face of a supposed, generous divorce offer, you have to understand the empire they thought they were stealing. And more importantly, you have to understand that they had no idea who actually built it. It started with a promise I made to myself in a cramped apartment that always smelled like lemon cleaner and my mother's exhaustion. She worked double shifts, cleaning other people's houses, her hands raw, her back aching. She taught me that the world doesn't hand you anything. You take what's yours through sheer grit. That was my inheritance. That grit got me through college and into investment banking, where I found my home. I loved the cold, hard logic of a balance sheet. It never lied. It told you exactly where you stood. I learned to turn red ink into black. Then I met Ethan. He was the heir to a massive construction conglomerate. Charming, easygoing, and utterly convinced that his father's success was his own birthright. I fell for the idea of a softer life. I was ready to leave the high-stress world behind and focus on a family, a home. But his father, Arthur, saw something else. He was a self-made man, forged from the same kind of struggle as my mother. A few months after the wedding, he called me into his corner office. "My son has the name," he said, "but you have the head for numbers and the spine for this business. I want you on my team." I agreed, thinking it would be temporary. But from my first day, the truth was glaring. Ethan treated the company like a social club. He show up late, charm the secretaries, and disappear for 3-hour client lunches that were really just rounds of golf. He was a ghost in a suit, a placeholder. I remember one night coming home after midnight. A supplier had gone under, and I'd spent hours untangling a logistics nightmare to keep our projects on schedule. I walked in to find Ethan on the couch, surrounded by empty takeout containers, engrossed in a video game. "There was a crisis," I said, exhausted. "I could have used your help." He didn't pause. "You handled it, right? You're better at the details, Ratch. I'm the big picture guy." That was the moment I realized the truth. He wasn't just lazy, he was willfully absent. His inheritance wasn't a responsibility to him, it was a safety net. He never had to worry about the details because someone, first his father, then me, always would. So I dove in. I poured everything into that company. Arthur became my mentor. He taught me the business from the ground up, the smell of wet concrete at dawn, the weight of a blueprint, how to negotiate with foremen who could smell fear. The board, a group of seasoned executives who had been with Arthur for decades, was skeptical. A woman, and the daughter-in-law at that, telling them how to run things, but numbers don't have biases. I streamlined operations, slashed waste, and opened new markets. Profits soared. Slowly, the skepticism turned to respect. They started coming to my office for final approvals, bypassing Ethan entirely. But while my professional life was thriving, my personal life was crumbling. It wasn't a single explosion, it was a slow leak. The deepest cut came when we started trying for a family. I wanted it more than anything, the one dream I had left from that simpler life I'd imagined. After months of nothing, we saw a specialist. The waiting rooms were sterile, filled with couples wearing the same mask of desperate hope. I'd sit there, clutching my purse, while Ethan scrolled through his phone, sighing with impatience. The physical toll was brutal. Injections, hormones that made me feel like a stranger in my own skin, constant appointments. One morning, my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't give myself the shot. I called for Ethan. He came to the door, saw the needle, and physically backed away. "I can't do that," he said. "Needles freak me out. You've got this." He walked away, leaving me crying on the bathroom floor. I'll never forget the day the doctor told us our second IVF cycle had failed. He spoke in gentle, clinical terms about the odds. I felt hollow, shattered. I looked at Ethan for support, for him to take my hand and say we'd figure it out. In the car, he stared out the window. "Maybe it's a sign," he said flatly. "This is too much stress. All those hormones, they're making you emotional. Maybe we just stop forcing it. If it happens, it happens." "Ethan, the doctor just said it won't just happen," I whispered. He shrugged. "It's not the end of the world." He didn't see that my heart was breaking. He saw my pain as an inconvenience. That night, I cried myself to sleep while he slept soundly next to me. A part of me died then, the part that believed we were a team. I didn't just lose a marriage. I lost the person I was in it. So I did what I always did when I was hurting. I worked. I poured all that pain into the company. Work didn't disappoint me. It gave back exactly what I put in. I became relentless and the company thrived. Arthur saw it. He never mentioned the baby, but he started giving me more and more control, grooming me to take over. The promotion was never announced publicly to save Ethan the embarrassment. But within the company, everyone knew who was really in charge. I was the CEO in everything but name. And Ethan drifted further away, content in his own world, oblivious to the woman I was becoming. Then Camille arrived. She blew into our lives with 3 designer suitcases and a story about being a victim. Her marriage to a lawyer had ended badly, leaving her with a taste for luxury she couldn't afford. She needed a place to stay. Ethan, allergic to conflict, agreed immediately. But I knew my stepsister. She had always wanted what I had. As kids, it was my favorite doll. In high school, it was my boyfriend. Now she looked at my life, the penthouse, the Brooks name, and I saw the calculation in her eyes. Her campaign was subtle. At first, it was flattery aimed at Ethan. "You're so lucky, Rachel," she'd say at dinner. "Ethan is so strong. He must be incredible at running that company. It's so wonderful he lets you have your little career." Ethan would puff up, loving the image she painted of him as a titan of industry. He never corrected her. He loved the idea of being the powerful CEO she imagined him to be. Camille did a little digging, but she only found what she wanted to find, old press releases nomming Ethan as the heir. She saw the legacy and assumed the man came with the power. Her attacks on me were insidious. She'd whisper to Ethan when I worked late. "Poor Rachel, she works so hard. A woman shouldn't have to carry that much stress." She planted seeds with my mother-in-law, suggesting my ambition was why we didn't have children. I overheard her on the phone once. "Some women are just built differently. Her career is her baby." It escalated to sabotage. One night, we hosted a massive investor gala. I was set to give the keynote, the speech that would define our next fiscal year. Minutes before I went on, Camille tripped beside me. A full glass of red wine splashed down the front of my white suit. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she cried, dabbing at it with a napkin, making it worse. Her face was a mask of horror, but her eyes gleamed for a split second. I saw it. I had to give my speech in a borrowed jacket from the hotel manager. I nailed it, but I felt the humiliation. I knew she was a snake, but I was too busy running a billion-dollar company to play her games. I underestimated her desperation. That was my mistake. The final blow came on a Tuesday. It was the culmination of months of brutal negotiations with a Japanese firm. a deal that would secure the company's future for a decade. It was my deal. I had built it from scratch. That afternoon, the contract was signed. Arthur called me, his voice thick with pride. "You did it, Rachel. You're the best leader this company has ever had." I drove home on a cloud, hoping this win might finally bridge the gap between Ethan and me. I walked into the penthouse, ready to celebrate. Ethan was waiting. He wasn't smiling, he was packing. "We need to talk," he said, his voice strange. My stomach dropped. I thought he was feeling overshadowed. "I just closed the Nakatomi deal," I said, holding up my briefcase. "That's great," he said, his eyes empty. He took a shaky breath. "Camille is pregnant, it's mine, I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant. Divorce. My brain couldn't process it. My greatest professional triumph delivered in the same hour as my most devastating personal failure. I felt a heat creep up my neck, my vision blurring. I wanted to scream. To ask how he could do this after everything. After my years of holding his life together, after the pain of the failed IVF, after I had poured my soul into his family's company. But all that came out was a choked whisper. "What?" He repeated it, finally looking at the floor. "I'm sorry." Sorry, such a small, pathetic word for the destruction he'd caused. In that moment, I realized the man I married was a ghost. A placeholder. The life I thought I had was an illusion. The shock was so profound it was like being plunged into ice water. Everything was slow and muffled. I remember walking to the kitchen, my legs feeling disconnected, pouring a glass of water. My hand was steady. It was bizarre. My world had ended, but my body was on autopilot. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on the couch in the dark after Ethan packed a bag and left to be with her. I sat in our silent, empty home and felt nothing. A terrifying, hollow emptiness. The pain was too big, so my mind shut down. But as the sun rose, casting long gray shadows across the expensive furniture, something else began to surface through the numbness. A cold, hard clarity. The shock was wearing off, and underneath it was a bedrock of anger. Not the hot, screaming kind, but a focused, glacial rage. They thought they could take everything from me. They thought I was just the wife who would crumble and be paid off. They had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had forgotten who I was. I wasn't the heartbroken wife anymore. I was the woman running Brooks Construction, and I was about to handle this like a hostile takeover. The next morning, I didn't call my mom to cry. I put on my sharpest suit, dark navy, my armor, and drove to Arthur's estate. I walked into his study and laid it out, not as a grieving daughter-in-law, but as his business partner reporting a threat. "Ethan is having an affair with my stepsister," I said, my voice even. "She claims she's pregnant. He's asking for a divorce. This is a risk to the company's reputation. Camille is not stable." Arthur listened, his face stone. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. I saw a flicker of pain, the disappointment of a father, before it was replaced by the cold calculation of a CEO. "He is a fool," he said, his voice low. "This company is not his to risk. It's yours. Handle your divorce. I'll handle my son." I left with a mandate. The weight felt lighter. The next call was to Valerie, a legal shark I'd worked with before. I met her in her sleek office and gave her the facts. "So," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face, "they think he's the king, and she thinks she's about to be queen." "That's the plan." "Oh," Valerie laughed, "this is going to be fun. They have no idea they're trying to stage a coup in a kingdom where you're already on the throne." I spent the next 2 weeks in a strange state of suspension. At work, I was decisive, leading multi-million-dollar meetings. But at night, I'd go home to the silence, and the anger would give way to waves of grief. I'd stare at our wedding photo and feel a profound ache for the woman I used to be. Meanwhile, Camille was playing the victor on social media. She posted photos of her and Ethan at my favorite restaurants with captions about finding happiness. She even posted an ultrasound, a blurry black-and-white image meant as my final humiliation. Each post was a twist of the knife, but with every picture, my resolve hardened. She wasn't just taking my husband. She was trying to erase me. and I was about to show her she was celebrating far, far too soon. The day of the settlement meeting arrived. I walked into that cold room feeling like a general before battle. Calm, focused, ready. Camille walked in like she owned the place, a triumphant smirk on her face. She sat down and took control, her voice dripping with fake pity. "I know this is hard," she began. "We want to be generous. Just name your price for the alimony, whatever you need to start over." Valerie raised an eyebrow. I remained silent, letting her hang herself. "And about the penthouse," Camille continued, waving a hand. "Obviously, we'll be living there. It's his family's property. You'll need to be out by the end of the month." Valerie slid a document across the table. "That's interesting," she said, her voice cool. "This is the title deed. The building is owned by Brooks Construction. It's a corporate asset." Camille frowned. "So it's a company perk, part of his executive package." "Not exactly," Valerie countered, sliding another paper over. "This is the employee lease agreement. The condo is leased at fair market rate. The rent is deducted from his paycheck." She named a figure that made Ethan flinch. Camille's smug face began to crack. "What are you talking about? Your salary? You're the heir," she hissed at Ethan. This was my cue. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table. "He's not the heir, Camille. He's an employee, a senior advisor." Valerie slid over Ethan's employment contract. I had signed it 2 years prior. His job title and duties were clear. Then came his most recent pay stub. The number was respectable for a normal person, but it was pocket change in the world Camille thought she was entering. It wasn't enough to fund her lifestyle, let alone pay the rent on the condo or the alimony she owed her ex-husband. Camille stared at the stub, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally blotchy, furious red. She snatched the paper. "This is a joke. You're lying. You cooked the books." "It's no trick," I said, my voice steady. "It's the truth, a truth you were too greedy and too lazy to look for." "But the CEO," she stammered, looking between Ethan and me. Valerie leaned back, a broad smile on her face. She gestured toward me with her pen. "You're looking at her. Rachel was appointed CEO 18 months ago by the board. Her compensation package, salary, bonuses, stock options, and full discretionary control over all corporate assets, including the penthouse, is, shall we say, a bit more substantial." The silence was absolute. Camille's jaw hung open. The smugness, the pity, the triumph, it all melted away, replaced by pure shock. Her entire fantasy had been built on a foundation of lies, and I had just pulled the pin. She finally found her voice, a strangled sound. "You let me believe," she shrieked at Ethan, turning on him. "You told me you ran everything." Ethan shrank in his chair. Rachel handles most of the day-to-day." "Handles it," Camille's voice rose. "She is it, and you're nothing. I left my life for nothing." She slumped in her chair, the expensive dress suddenly looking cheap. The woman who had walked in expecting to claim her prize was staring at the ruins of her own greed. The divorce settlement was over before it began. There was nothing to split, no fortune, no inheritance, just Ethan's modest salary and her mountain of debt. I stood up. "I think we're done here." I walked out without a backward glance. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt free. They wanted my life. They just didn't realize my life wasn't theirs to take. The fallout was swift, but the final nail in Camille's coffin came from an unexpected source, my mother-in-law. She had been cautiously excited about the prospect of a grandchild, even under these circumstances. But after the truth about Ethan's position came out, her suspicions were aroused. She started asking questions. "Which doctor are you seeing, dear? When can I come with you to an appointment?" Camille panicked, becoming evasive. Her web of lies was too tangled to keep straight. My mother-in-law told Arthur her concerns. He hired a private investigator. It took less than 48 hours to uncover the truth. There was no pregnancy. There never had been. The ultrasound was a stock photo from the internet. She had faked the entire thing to trap Ethan and secure a connection to the Brooks fortune. When Arthur confronted her with the evidence, she didn't even deny it. The rage was biblical. He threw her out that day. He told her if she ever contacted the family again, he would sue her for fraud and leak every detail of her deception to the press. Facing total ruin, Camille disappeared in the middle of the night, leaving Ethan to face his parents, crushing disappointment alone. A few days later, Ethan showed up at my new apartment. I'd rented a smaller place in Midtown, a space that was entirely my own. He looked like a ghost, pale, thin, his easy charm replaced by a desperate, hollow look. "Rachel," he started, his voice cracking. "I made a terrible mistake. She lied about everything. Can we try again, counseling?" I looked at him and felt a flicker of pity, not for the loss of him, but for how pathetic he was. He wasn't evil. He was just weak. A man-child who had floated through life on privilege and had finally crashed to earth. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "We can't. This was never about her lies. It was about your choices. You checked out of our marriage long before she showed up. You were gone the day you told me my pain over losing a child was just stress. You were gone every time you chose a game over your responsibilities. She was just a symptom of a disease that was already there. I'm done." He started to plead, but I shook my head and closed the door. The lock clicking into place was the sound of my future beginning. Life after the storm was quiet. Arthur handled Ethan. He wasn't fired for his mother's sake, but transferred to a remote office in Alabama, managing inventory. A demotion so profound it was a public statement. He was no longer the heir. He was just another employee, finally forced to earn his keep. With the drama gone, my focus returned to work, but something was different. I wasn't working to escape anymore. I was working to build. The board officially removed acting from my title. I was the CEO of Brooks Construction. The first thing I did was greenlight a project I'd dreamed of for years, building affordable, sustainable housing communities. It was riskier, lower margin than our usual skyscrapers, but it was work that built homes, not just buildings. Then I did something for the woman I had become. I established a mentorship program named after my mother-in-law, designed to fund and support women entering construction, engineering, and architecture, fields dominated by men. I wanted to give other women the support Arthur had given me. I wanted to turn my painful experience into a ladder for someone else to climb. My relationship with my in-laws transformed. They treated me not as a daughter-in-law, but as the true successor. We'd have dinner weekly, talking about the future of the company, a future firmly in my hands. They valued me more than their own son, a fact that was both a triumph and a quiet, lingering tragedy. I found peace in my new apartment. It wasn't a corporate showpiece. It was a home. I filled it with books and art and the quiet satisfaction of a life I had built with my own two hands. A few months ago, I stood on the rooftop of our newest building, a gleaming tower that scraped the sky. The dedication ceremony was over, and I was alone, looking out at the city lights spreading out like a carpet of diamonds. I thought about the journey that brought me here. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the humiliation. It would have been easy to become bitter, to let that rage consume me. But looking out at that view, at the tangible proof of what I could create, I didn't feel anger. I felt profound gratitude. The betrayal didn't break me. It revealed me. It stripped away the life I thought I wanted and forced me to embrace the woman I was truly meant to be. My mother taught me to work hard. Arthur taught me to lead. But Ethan and Camille taught me my most valuable lesson, that my worth was never tied to a man, a marriage, or a name. It was tied to my own strength, my own integrity, and my own resilience. I wasn't just a survivor of my story. I became its architect. I wasn't just a survivor of my story. I became its architect. Thank you so much for listening to my journey today. It means the world to share it with you all. I have to ask, have you ever had a moment in your life where a betrayal actually ended up making you stronger? Let me know your story in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Winds of Thought. Keep building your own path, and I'll see you in the next one.